Dear colleagues, welcome back to the masterclass series on diabetic foot ulcers. Today's topic is clinical examination and wound assessment in diabetic foot. So, once a patient walks in OPD, the most important part remains history taking. Now, as clinicians, sometimes we are quite busy. It's better we should make a questionnaire and then ask our assistant to fill it for us. Now, coming to the points which are most important in history taking, what is the patient's profile? Now, we know that the diabetic foot ulcers they are more common in fifth and sixth decade of life. Male and females they are equally affected. The patients who are having low socioeconomic group, who belong to low socioeconomic status, they are more prone to diabetic foot ulcers because the education level is also less. So sometimes we keep on telling the patients to keep to take proper care of their feet, but they are not able to do so. Patient's occupation. Now we know the high risk of below knee amputations are in taxi drivers, housewives, cooks, laborers, and factory workers wearing safety boots. Then, what is the functional status of a patient? Is he able to walk? Is the patient bedridden? Is he on a wheelchair? Or can the patient walk into the community or is housebound? Then, is there any family history of diabetes? Is there any history of recent trauma? Now, once a patient is having sensory neuropathy, he does not know when he has sustained an injury. Injury may be just by hitting the corner of the bed or maybe with the table. So, a wound can be formed on the foot which may go unnoticed because of presence of sensory neuropathy. Secondly, sometimes when a patient sees there is a callosity formation on the feet, now what does the patient do? He takes a blade or a scissors and tries to cut it. So it's better to educate the patients not to do all these things because a small callosity, once the patient is cutting, it can lead to infection leading to diabetic foot ulceration. Does the patient self medicate? Now, it is very common, especially in Indian patients, when we see that a wound is there, patient notices it, and then he tries to pour coffee powder or turmeric, or he likes to apply some Chinese herbs. But we have to teach them that these things can aggravate infection. Type of footwear worn, whether it's open or closed, type of diabetes, whether we are dealing with type 1 or type 2 of diabetes, and what medication patient is having. Is he on insulin or is he on oral hypoglycemic agents? Does the patient monitor his or her diabetes? Now, once we ask a patient about his diabetic status, the standard reply which we get is we have checked it with a glucometer in the morning and it is normally 120, 130 or 140. Now we have to teach the patient about the importance of HbA1c levels. We know glucometers sometimes they do not give accurate results. So HbA1c level, once the patients come to me and I ask them about HbA1c level, majority of them they say, sir, we do not know what these levels are. Nobody has told us. Even the attending doctor has not told us. How far it is true, I do not know. But yes, HbA1c levels should be considered as the main criteria for control of diabetes. And all of us know that it is in between 6 to 7% is the best. That means the diabetic control is very good, or we can broadly say less than 7. But we have to tell the patient that he has to get it done every 3 months. If he is getting it done, we should note down the figures in the history, and if he is not getting it done, we should also note down that the patient is not getting HbA1c done at regular intervals. Then any complications or diabetics present. For example, cataract may be there, or the patients may say there is impairment of vision. Same is in diabetic retinopathy. Nephropathy, we should suspect diabetic nephropathy when we see a generalized swelling on the body. Then diabetic neuropathy, the patient may complain of glove and stocking sensory disturbance in feet. Then diabetic vasculopathy can be there, that we come to know from claudication or the rest pain. We will come to all these things gradually. So what are comorbidities present? Now, hypertension is one of them. Now, hypertension predisposes a patient to atherosclerosis, increases the risk of peripheral vascular disease and ischemic heart disease. Chronic renal failure. Now, patient may present with CRF and it leads to a immunocompromised stage. The patient who are going renal dialysis, postoperative bleeding is quite common with subsequent hematoma formation, and the chances of wound healing, rather I should put it, are up to 50 to 60%. Now, if a patient is with CVA, that means he is paralyzed. So chances of pressure ulceration and bed sore formation are quite high. And in case a venous or arterial disease is present, the patient may be at a risk of ulceration. The best example is varicose veins. Now, in case the patient is having varicose veins, he may present to you with varicose ulcers. Now, once a patient complains of pain, so the most important is to ask the patient where the pain is located. Is it in the toes? Is it in the dorsum of foot? And in case it is dorsum of foot, the differential diagnosis should include gout or extensor tendinitis. If it is present in the heel, we should always rule out plantar fasciitis, heel spurs, heel fractures, or stone bruise. And if it is in the sole of foot, we should try to identify the area, whether it's a ball of foot, that may be because of metatarsalgia, or if it is an arch pain, that may be because of plantar fasciitis, fallen arches, or flat feet. We know about Charcot, foot, so that also falls under arch pain. So the learning point is foot pain anywhere or everywhere is due to neuropathy or vasculopathy. What additional information we can get once we take history of pain? Now, in case the patient presents, he comes and says that when he starts walking, at that time there is no pain. But after walking for a short distance, then he starts feeling a pain. So that is called claudication distance. And it occurs because of inadequate blood supply. And the significance, it is the commonest symptom of ischemic limb disease. The example which we can consider is TAO, that is thromboangiitis obliterans, and of course vasculopathy associated with diabetes. Coming to the rest pain, now patient says when he lies down, sometimes he has shooting pain in the legs. Now, what is the principle behind it? The principle is when a patient lies down, the overall blood pressure decreases. So, once the blood pressure decreases, there is further decrease in the pressure in the legs. So, the best thing is to tell the patient at that time that he should sit in for some time, maybe 15 to 20 minutes, and ideally he should hang his feet or legs over the bed, sit in that position for 15 to 20 minutes, and then lie down. Now, the principle is by doing so, The blood pressure, which had come down on lying down position, it goes up. And once it goes up, the pain which was there, that decreases. The commonest causes diabetic neuropathy, or it may be nerve entrapment syndrome. Like in the wrist, we have got carpal tunnel syndrome, where there may be a condition which is called tarsal tunnel syndrome. And significance, it is common in diabetic foot patients. So coming to the triangle of wound assessment. Now two principles are there. We know about time management. We will come to that later on. And this is the latest study how a wound can be assessed, which is a new approach. Three distinct zones are there. First is wound bed, which includes tissue type, exudate, and infection. Then wound edge, whether it is advancing or non-advancing. Then peri-wound skin, whether there is maceration or dry skin or, or hyperkeratosis. Hyperkeratosis means hard skin, or there is a callus formation. So coming to first the tissue type, tissue may be in the form of necrotic tissue. That means it's a dead tissue. The death of the cells happen due to lack of oxygen and blood supply, and you can see a dry scar formation over the heel in this patient. Then it may be in the form of slough. And what is slough? Slough is devitalized proteins with collagen and fibrin. It may be yellow, tan, green, or brown in color. It may be moist, loose, and stingy in appearance. Tissue type, whether it is a granulating tissue or not, and granulating tissue is also of two types, whether it is unhealthy or healthy. Unhealthy means it is usually black, dusky red in color, as you can see in the picture, and healthy granulation tissue is usually red in color and it indicates good wound healing. Epithelializing tissue. Now, as you can see from the margins of the wound, now epithelializing tissue looks pink with shiny pearl appearance. Now, this is a typical picture of a patient where epithelialization is coming up. Now, exudate or discharge. It may be serum or pus, which indicates infected ulcer. Exudate may be low, moderate, or high. Now, irrespective of the quantity of exudate, it always indicates presence of infection. Note the color and smell of discharge. Now, as soon as the patient walks in your office, in your chamber, in case there is smell, you can make out what type of discharge or what type of organism is going to be there. Well, coming to the color, it may be thick brown with little odor. Just think of Staph aureus. In case it is greenish, rotten fruit or metallic smell, think about Pseudomonas. And in case it is a fecal smell, it may be because of anaerobic infection, especially by Bacteroides species. Now coming to the infection, it may be local or spreading, or as we know, it may be systemic. So what are the local signs and symptoms which we can see? Increased pain, erythema, edema, local warmth, increase in exudate, delayed healing, bleeding, friable granulation tissue, malodor, or pocketing. Now we know these are all signs of acute inflammation. Now once it starts spreading, there may be increase in pain, there may be increased erythema, fever can be there may be pus formation, the wound breakdown can be there, cellulitis may be there, general malaise can be there, and TLC will be raised in such cases and localized, especially inguinal lymphadenitis or lymphadenopathy may be there. Now coming to the odor of the wound, what does it indicate? It indicates the tissue is either necrosed or there is bacterial colonization. Now sometimes the dressings like hydrochlorides, they also react with wound and produce a malodor. So wound odor, it may be because of metabolic process of anaerobic bacteria, or it may be due to tissue degeneration, which may be because of pressure ulcers or leg ulcers or diabetic foot ulcers. So what is the learning point? The strong smell indicates increased bioburden. Bioburden means the presence of infection. Now this is an overall chart about tissue type, exudate, infection. Once a patient comes, we should look at the wound. We should note down the size of an ulcer, length, width, depth should be recorded. Now this is what we can make and keep it with us for our reference when a patient comes, on intervals or the follow-up checkups. We can always see the percentage of slough which is there, necrotic material, granulating or non-granulating wound, epithelialization, and what type of amount exudate is there, whether it is dry, low, medium or high, or if the quantity is changing, and so on. Same is with the infection. Now coming to the examination of an ulcer, that is the edge of the wound, most important, whether it is advancing or non-advancing. Now in case it is advancing, a wound bed is also able to support epithelialization by promoting, as you can see from the figures, cell migration across wound bed, attachment of edge to the wound bed, and an ideal wound edge should have thin epithelial margin. You can make out in the picture that is a thin epithelialized margin, or there may be pale pink to translucent, as you can make out in this picture. Now non-advancing, there may be presence of maceration, dehydration, undermined or rolled or curled edges of the wound. Now what do they signify? So once the macerated edges are there, so maceration occurs when the skin is in contact with moisture for too long. That is normally when the exudate is moderate or high. Skin looks lighter in color and wrinkly, as you can make out in the picture. It may feel soft, wet or soggy to touch, and the aim is to provide an absorbent dressing, maybe a foam dressing or coloplast, which we normally use in our practice, so that the exudate part is taken care of. Dehydrated edges, that means the low moisture impairing cellular development and migration needed for new tissue growth. We know the importance of the wound to be kept moist. Whenever we go for any discussion as colleagues, we always say that the wound should be kept moist, because in case the wound is not moist, it will not lead to development or migration which is required for new tissue growth. So aim is to hydrate, and the best example which we use in our practice is hydrogel. Non-advancing wound edges undermined. Now mostly it is in tuberculosis. In case a patient comes to you, the patient is having a chronic wound, and you see on examination they are undermined. It's always better to take a biopsy and send it for histopathology examination. And in such patients, the overhanging skin is thin, friable, reddish blue, or unhealthy. So what is the aim? The aim is to convert a chronic wound into acute wound. And how will you do it? By going for surgical debridement of the margins. And once you have gone for surgical debridement, as I said, you should send the specimen for histopathology examination. Rolled out, which is called epibole. Epibole refers to the rolled or curled under closed wound edges that may be dry, calloused, or hyperkeratosis. Now, hyperkeratosis means a very hard, sort of edges or the margins which are present, and callosity, we know that is also hardness which is present around the ulcer. It tends to be lighter in color than surrounding tissue, have a raised and rounded appearance, may feel hard, rigid, and indurated. Now, the aim is to return the wound edges to a condition that will permit epithelial advancement. And how will we do? Just go for surgical debridement. Now, this is the overall picture. You can make a chart, you can keep it on your table, and this is how it all looks. Then, coming to the floor of ulcer. Floor of ulcer, if it's a healing ulcer, there will be present red granulation tissue. If it's a slow healing ulcer, it will be the granulation tissue will be pale and smooth. If it is a gummatous ulcer, that gives a wash leather slough appearance, and a tropic ulcer penetrates down to the bone, and a black mass, in case it is present, always rule out malignant melanoma. Take a biopsy, send it for histopathology, you will come to know what type of ulcer you are dealing with. So what else we should know once we are examining a patient or we are examining an ulcer? Record the ulcer size, that is length, width and depth. Now length and width is very easy to record. We can take a scale and we can measure it. And how to measure a depth? Take a swab, sterile swab, dip it in the ulcer and see how deep it is going. So whatever you see, measure the depth of the wick, that indicates the depth of the ulcer. Then what is the number and what is the position? Now position is also very important because we know that in neurogenic ulcers they are mainly present on the plantar aspect of the foot, but in case we talk about pressure ulcers, which may be bed sores for example, so the position is very important for us to understand. Mode of onset, any history of trauma, as I already said, and these ulcers generally heal themselves, but provided the patient is not having pressure ulceration at that point, or proper offloading maybe has been given. But these are the things we will discuss in our follow-up lectures. Then spontaneous, it may follow after a swelling or maybe after a bullae formation, like diabetic bullae. Then duration, whether it is acute or chronic. Pain, is it painful or it's a painless? Now neuropathy ulcers are painless, and neuroischemic ulcers means a combination of ischemia as well as neuropathy. Now these ulcers are normally painful, and ulcers associated with inflammation may be painful. Peri-wound area. Now when we talk about peri-wound area, that is approximately area which is approximately 4 centimeter outside the wound edge, but it may extend beyond that. Maceration, look for maceration, excoriation and dry skin. Then hyperkeratosis, that is, as I said, is a thickening of outer layer of the skin. Then any callus formation which is there. So we have to go and look for all these things very clearly. History part can be recorded by our assistant, but as far as examination is concerned, that is our duty as a clinicians to look for all these things when we are going to examine a wound. And this is the overall picture, how the maceration looks, how the excoriation is, dry skin, hyperkeratosis and callus formation. And as I said, the peri-wound area 1 to 4 centimeter of the wound edge. Now that is all about history taking. Now, further examination we will continue in part 2. Till then, just go through the lecture, see what all you like. In case you want to give any comments, you can just give on my channel. Leave the comments. I will try to answer all your inquiries. Thank you very much for watching this lecture, and after that we will be coming to part 2 of the examination of foot. Thank you very much.